Start.
Okay, Renee, we're ready to go.
All right. Good evening. This is the May 26, 2016 meeting of the Oregon City Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We're now in session. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. You want to start, Roger?
Roger Pollard-Tice.
Joyce Gifford.
Sean Datchler.
Dan Tupper.
Doug Neely.
Blaine Meyer.
Chris Cook.
Denise Conrad, Interim Community Services Director.
All right. All right. First order of business is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any comments or changes to make to the minutes?
Move to approve.
I second.
All right. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right. Minutes are approved. Probably should have done that earlier. All right. All right. Next action. Citizen comments on issues and items not on the agenda. And we do not have any citizens here wishing to make comment. All right. General business. Let's discuss the non-smoking policy in parks. So, and I apologize for missing the last meeting, but it looks like you guys have worked up some language in policy. So, looking at this, I'm assuming we are actually proposing this as an official policy, and we're seeking approval tonight, or?
We are reviewing the language tonight, and the process, whether it be by an ordinance amendment or by city manager, is still being worked out between the city manager and the attorney as to how they want to process and proceed. So at this point in time, we are just reviewing the language, and he also is asking if we can take a look and think through. On the front page is the whereases, kind of the reasons why we want this. So,
All right. John?
So I have a question of the purpose of putting the park hours in a smoking policy. I obviously haven't got to read it, but that was the first sentence practically.
the part that we're looking at is on the back page, the underlying portion.
Oh, it's just that part.
The underlying portion is
So it
the
appears to be just
revision.
an add-on to a
I'm sorry, I was
current
reading it
ordinance,
all.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this would be an
Item
amendment
11.
to the current ordinance that's currently in our municipal code.
Shouldn't it be smoking in any public park?
So you have to look
Right.
back on Part A. It is unlawful for any person to smoke in any public park, period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see. The context goes back to that.
So you have to add that, yeah.
Yeah.
The second sentence under 11, is it me, or is that just read kind of funky with the "to smoke shall be" mean the
Yes.
possession?
Oh, that is right.
To smoke shall mean. Yeah.
Shall mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is mean to smoke, yeah.
Yeah. If it's mean, it's mean in the present too. Shall be, no. Yeah, shall mean.
Well, in general, then I'll go on.
Yeah.
Another edit I just heard from the right was, just to make it a little consistent, have 11 begin smoking in any public park, and then smoking shall mean, rather than smoke and to smoke.
I agree. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, and he was the one who suggested it.
I think Joyce's comment, though, and I'm not
You did it
the
better.
linguist here, but it's a follow-on from A on the first page after the colon, so it has to read, "It is unlawful for any person to, colon," and then the topic in
Right.
11 continues.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Okay,
So it
Given
should-
that, it's a different context.
okay.
So what we're talking about is it should be, it is unlawful for any person to smoke in any public park.
Period.
To smoke
yes.
shall mean the possession
Yeah.
of.
Yeah,
Two smokes.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to my first topic because that's what caught my eye. I would suggest that we detour a slight bit with this, and if we're going to be upgrading or updating this policy, we look at any other lines that may or may not fit for me, I've always had a huge heartburn with the park hours as written in policy. I believe that park hours should be something more such as 1 hour or 30 minutes past sunset to a fixed time, as many other jurisdictions do. And I believe that for a very specific reason. Living directly next to a park, that gives, one, the neighborhood peace and quiet after dark, rather than what I used to see was kids smoking, although this would fix that, directly behind my fence in the pitch dark, and I'd have nothing to go on at 8 or 9 o'clock when I'd call the police, because they technically haven't broken any laws. And I felt that being a person adjacent to the park, I'm the best eyes on that park during the day, and that's the minimum payback you could give back to me
Right.
as a neighbor.
And I fully support reviewing this. I think for the no smoking policy, I think we can move ahead and make a suggestion on that, and then maybe we set an additional agenda item then for the
Okay.
next meeting to actually review this statement.
Yeah.
Because we do need to also look at, because you had mentioned all these, the whereas sections, so we need to somehow, we need to figure out and lay out why we want to do this. Correct?
Explanation of the purpose.
Right.
And so, do you want to have a work session to do that instead of doing an open session?
Well, I mean, I think,
And then have the conversation about it in open session after?
I think so often that's helpful. I think we get more done, more focused in a work session.
Our 30-minute last time, you know, like a 30-minute at 6:30. Ours was at 6 last time. We were done by 6:35, and it was very productive.
Yeah. So, if everybody's willing to do one at the next meeting.
Sure.
In the meantime, why don't,
So going back to the whereas, I know that, I'm sorry Bob wasn't able to join us tonight because he's really the one that was spearheading this. And his whole thing about, you know, we're promoting health. And
exactly.
so smoking is not healthy. And so whereas parks are a healthy environment for families.
Exactly.
That it's yada yada, you know, for the
Right. So why don't I make the suggestion that we have that we schedule the half an hour work session at the next meeting, and I know we're going to discuss the date for that meeting. So, a bit later, and then also I'll contact Bob, and then we'll maybe get some language we can then email out to the group to then work with when we come back in.
If we look back on some of his emails to
Yeah.
us, there's some of that information is already there. So
Yeah.
In general,
Yeah.
I think it looks good, though.
Yeah.
you didn't tell us to bring the whereases tonight.
I didn't get this until after 5.
Okay, all right. Well,
So we're working
All right.
on
it sounds like a June work session.
Yeah.
And we're not in a hurry. I mean, there's no time crunch. I mean, it'd be nice to get this, keep it moving, but there's not a deadline.
There is not a deadline. I have it on the commission's work session calendar. I believe that one is a July work session. However, you know, if we bump into that, we can move it to the next work session.
Okay.
Typically, you present it at a work session, then they'd make the decision if it will continue forward.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Next item. Oh,
Just something that come to mind. I think state law is prohibited in terms of regulations, but we're dealing with marijuana issues now, and of course it's not all smoking. And I don't know if we just want to put state law applies to public places or something of that nature. Give it some thought, and maybe some research can be done. But I think that is prohibited under state law under the current.
Currently, yeah.
Currently, it might be something that we could ask the attorney, perhaps, to check into.
I can do that.
all right. Next item. Considering the possible relocation of the Larry Dahl Monument to city property.
Well, I'll give the latest update. I know that members of the VFW and the Clackamas County Historical Society have a meeting next Thursday to discuss kind of all the ideas that have been put on the table, and the Historical Society owns it, and it's ultimately their decision what its final disposition will be. Everybody agrees that something should happen to it, but it's just a matter of getting all the ideas in the same room at the same time and see what comes out of it.
So what time and where is that meeting?
I do not know.
There's an article on it in the local news. I think this was Oregon City News. And
I just told Doug it wasn't out yet because I didn't find it.
it was online. I just found it probably
I'm
right
not a
around,
very good searcher.
probably around
I wasn't at
quarter to five.
It was what?
I found it online about 4:45. So
Okay, good.
there is an article that is online now that you can view. I'll pass this around if you're interested. And it does have the
Kendall
picture, although it's
Memorial.
cut in half, the rendering. So, but I don't believe the date and time are on there as well.
Okay.
And I'm
you.
honestly not sure if it's a public meeting.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is, yeah, I'm just not sure.
All right.
More to come.
More to come. All right. The next item is date selection for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee annual report to the City Commission. And I apologize for missing the last one. I mean, to be honest, I'm okay with July, August, or September. So whatever would work better with the, best with the City Commission schedule. So
Okay. So we have July 6th, 20th, August 3rd, and 17th. And I can look to see how full those agendas are.
yeah, let's do that.
Now, my recollection is partially a report on what we've done, but is this the point we talk about goals for the future?
It's an annual report, and it's whatever you wish to bring forward to the commission to tell them.
Okay.
So if you want
Because
to.
I had mentioned one item, and I said we delay it because it have to go in the next budgeting cycle. But to get signage for trails through parks that connect one street to another, so people know that we really have a trail system in Oregon City, and that's not at all obvious. And yet we've got many parks that connect from one collector or what do you call the other kinds of streets that are major streets?
Material.
Thank you, arterials. Yeah.
So the only other consideration is we're running into our next fiscal year at the end of our biennium and gearing up for our budgeting for the second.
Right.
For
And
the
that's
next
why I
2-year
wanted
biennium.
right, and that's why I wanted to get in front of them before they have their goal setting next year, so they know that. And there might be some other things that we want to include in there.
Yeah, and it really sounds like one of the 2 dates then in July would be best. So we can
Yeah, a
get
little
that
bit
in.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I will check into that, and then I will email that back to you folks so that you are aware of what the date is. And I'll probably know on Tuesday next week.
all right. Okay. All right. Next item, the Newell Creek Canyon Plan update.
And that's actually just a placeholder. I don't have anything new to report on that, but I just wanted to keep it on the agenda so that we keep that in our forefront.
All
Same
right.
with the next one.
McLaughlin to Kanema Trail Planning Grant.
Also no report at this time, but also a placeholder.
All right. Then we come to the Willamette Falls Legacy Project standing update.
So I handed out.
So it was Scott all along.
I handed out the update format that's out. I think that is available online. I know that you folks had asked about the Whitewater Park project, and just as a brief update, that there is a process in how they're handling things within the property bounds and that are in the public easement. The Whitewater Park is outside of the extent of the public easement, and so they are still open to all ideas from the public for what is occurring. They want to have a very continuous flow for the Willamette Falls River Walk. So there's a lot of people involved in this processing, and so they just want to let you know that they're processing these pieces. Some of them are connected to the Riverwalk and some of them are connected to the property, and they go through some different processes in regards to that. There's a lot of interested parties, the private party owner of the Falls Legacy LLC and PGE owner of the dam. So everybody in those elements have input, and then there's plenty of public process that is coming forth as we go along. So they just wanted to kind of keep you updated on that and let you know that they're processing a number of things, and a lot of their factors for the Riverwalk and this project are their 4 core values. And so the handout kind of gives you a snapshot, but you're always welcome to inquire. They have contacts on there. They will be starting to provide monthly updates because as we move forward, obviously there's a lot of stakeholders, and so they want to kind of keep everybody kind of in the loop as the processes continue to move forward.
If I might, the Oregon City Business Alliance had the presentation of this
April.
I've got to get this right here. Had a presentation I'm sorry, a presentation of the potential of the waterway for kayaks and so forth that it goes through. It was a really nice presentation, and I think there was a lot of skepticism about it. I heard some expressed from staff after the presentation. I thought it was exciting. I think if that's able to move forward, the presentation they made showed the actual waterway going around the current buildings and so forth. So it did not look like it was affecting the current building footprint of the facility, but it was. I think it's going to be challenging because there are going to be permitting processes, water rights, PG, of course, having specific water rights and so on. But it was a great presentation, so there might be a point at which we would like to have that presentation made to us, but I think it's real kind of premature
Blaine?
at this time.
It's premature just that because they're not wanting to champion any one project because it's still an open slate for people to make those proposals. So the processes that they're doing right now through the planning and vetting of it's somewhat separate where we have the public easement part and then the private property part. Right. And so even though they're kind of collaboratively together, there's still processes that have to occur that, at this point we got to let them do their processes before championing any one project because there's vetting of feasibility, realistic, permitting, the financial aspects. There's a lot of moving parts to this process, and we're really still early in the process. So I think that allowing them to do their part before, and of course they'll come with what is, the forthcoming items, and honestly we don't know until things start kind of processing out. And at this point I think they're just trying to say it's still open. And so not championing any one project yet, but still saying that it's open and they're taking in all ideas.
So I've got a question, but with the what I think this project has going for it is that there are other parks like it in the United States, so it's not something new and untested. From my understanding, George Heidgerken, the owner, has at least endorsed the seeking of a grant. But I believe I heard in the presentation that Fish and Wildlife is in favor of it. So it has some good, but engineering and funding and all of those things are.
I don't remember the latter.
Yeah. I did hear that, but so.
I think it's exciting just right now to hear all the different ideas that are coming
Absolutely.
out and just all the possibilities. Not everything can be done there, but right now let's just throw out all of the great ideas and contemplate them, think about them. Go down and didn't they have some tours recently?
They are having tours on a fairly regular basis. There's notices that come out for those tours. So as PrAC, I think you're getting some of those notices. But with that standing monthly update, we should be able to get notices for upcoming tours. I'll make sure that I ask Christina and Kelly about that.
We could,
So-
I think, request, how many of us have gone on a tour? Maybe all of us have, so, yeah, but,
Christopher needs a tour.
Christopher needs a tour.
I would love a tour.
yeah. But when they have them, I think there's usually on Fridays. Last Friday they had a whole schedule of tours going through. I wasn't involved in that, but
So
Talk to Christina about getting a schedule and seeing if there's some openings that are coming up, and I'll let you know.
So
it's been
I-
a while since I've been. I mean, there might be some new
Yeah.
stuff.
yeah, more things torn
And a
out.
boat tour too, from from the water side. That's cool.
So one of the reasons that the Business Alliance encouraged Sam to originally, his whole summer is full, so with events, and so he was planning originally to do it in September, but with the Riverwalk planning process ongoing, we thought if anything's going to happen there, we want to get all, like Joyce was saying, get everything on the table early enough so that you're not impeding. So that, I guess that's my question. Is there any, with all of the public process, which is absolutely I support that, we support that, but is it going to impede the Riverwalk being built?
The Whitewater part?
Yes, planning for that and trying to incorporate that.
That's a good question for Christina and Kelly.
Okay.
There's only a portion that we're involved in regards to the Riverwalk that doesn't always coincide with some of the private parts. So I am just getting into these meetings, so I'm just going to say for at this moment, I'm not fully educated on exactly all the past history of meetings, and so I have to get up to speed on that. It's a question I can definitely present to Kelly and Christina.
So you haven't watched the videos for the last 12 months?
No. I'm working on catching up though.
The Metro, I think it's Metro Regional Government that has it, or maybe the city, but an easement has been committed from the developer, but for the Riverwalk.
And that
But
is a
whether-
public easement.
But whether or not the actual direction it goes is in place, I don't know.
And I know we have this as a standing agenda item. Would it make sense, barring anything unusual happening, just to actually have it regularly scheduled once a quarter that they come in and actually give us that update, rather than they come in whenever something's changed? And just thinking about it, and they can catch us up on the different proposals that are made. I mean, there can be some kind of specific questions that we regularly have for them.
I would question that frequency.
Yeah.
Maybe twice a year,
Twice a year.
6 months.
Yeah.
Christina's been in here numerous times,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Well-
they're not necessarily on a regular basis.
Right.
But probably once a year lately, she's at least been.
Yeah.
And does anyone know if they take minutes at these meetings? Could we be copied on those?
That I would have to ask, because there's not just one meeting.
Sure.
I attend one internal meeting here once a week. Kelly and Christina are almost fully dedicated to the project, and they attend multiple facets of meetings with the different pieces of the project. So minutes in terms of public process, in terms of internal processes, that part I would have to defer to them to answer.
Sure.
But I think, the Metro, that website is getting updated, and there's information that they put out. They have a public information person that is cultivating the media material, and that's kind of the public information portion. But I definitely will ask Kelly and Christina to what extent of information can be brought forth.
Just to be clear, when you said easements, I'm not up on what easements. I know because of what we dealt with the park up above when we were discussing the road going into the park. But it sounded like you said because of the easements, it didn't look good. Is that what you were
No,
reading?
I think what I said was there's a public easement for the Riverwalk that has been dedicated on that site. And my understanding is that the Whitewater park does not fall into the public easement. So we're tasked with the public easement of the Riverwalk, but that other facet with the Whitewater Park is on the private portion. So it doesn't, the private portion and the public easement aren't the same things and do not follow necessarily the same processes of the same stakeholders.
It would have to, whatever happens at one point, it has to go under the public easement though, to get back to the river. But
So I think that's kind of where the processes are, is, you know, vetting out all of the ideas and the private portion and the public portion and how many are mixing or can mix. And then they have to look at the funding, the feasibility, permitting. There's a lot of, again, moving parts to how these projects get developed. So that's why there's such a big team on this project that is working together with a lot of stakeholders.
Anything else? Any other comments?
I'm not aware of any other projects that are happening. I mean, being proposed for the site. I mean, other than mixed use.
I haven't heard anything specific.
I haven't heard anything specific either,
Okay.
but I'm not necessarily the most involved person in that project.
140-foot Ferris wheel or something.
Little Paris.
A velodrome.
Well, yeah, there you go.
I've always been a fan of the zip line from Westland to Oregon City or vice versa.
I've heard
Yeah,
that
that-
every time.
yeah, I think that's still on.
well, there actually are two pieces of properties that a urban renewal agency bought above the museum with intent that at one point or another it might serve as a zip line of some sort.
Yep.
There we go.
Rumor was fact.
That would be fun. All right. Let's move on to Clackamas Park Riverfront Master Plan.
So the update is we are on the commission work session agenda for June 7th, and we are discussing the North End Riverfront Master Plan update for Clackamas Park. Within that master plan update, targeted items are the parking, the new boat ramp, the RV park, and just that frontage of Clackamas Park on the riverfront. So we're going to the commission to have that discussion on the 7th, and the moving parts that we had already worked on will probably be discussed as well. We have 60% construction documents completed for the improvements of the RV park. We did a couple years ago. I think several of you were on the committee when we did those. So those are still out there. We haven't done anything with them. And we just received 30% construction docs for the new boat ramp in the new location, which I think you guys have all, I think Christopher may have been the only one that hasn't seen those. So I can send that to you so you can review it.
Would you send that to everybody?
I can. Actually, I can probably send both just as a refresher.
Did City Commission have a discussion regarding the placement of that boat ramp?
There has been a discussion or two in regards to the placement of the boat ramp. We hired a professional hydrologist consulting firm. And the reason we hired that firm is to just determine, as Oregon State Marine Board and the city, we wanted to make sure that whatever we invested into the boat ramps was sustainable. Knowing that our waterways have changed in the Clackamas, we wanted to see that we had a good placement for a replacement ramp, knowing that our existing ramp wouldn't be sustainable for very long. We could repair it. The proposed repair is 5-ish years long. They looked at the flooding. They looked at the current flows. They've looked at different models of hydrology, and they play all different courses of scenarios into the waterways. And there's one area that it appears to be a very viable place to put the new ramp location with lower current flows, less conflict with the flooding off the Willamette in conjunction with the Clackamas River. Anything in the Willamette River, we have sport craft above, and we have Meldrum Bar below, and they're within a half a mile of each other on a river mile. So to put another boat ramp in the Willamette bank is steeper, faster channel, more if you're a boater and you go through the Willamette area, that scour on the bank side is an indication of what we would contend with. And then when we flood, if you look at the peninsula island area, not really island, but peninsula of Clackamas Park, where all of the log debris is, that's what's coming across the frontage shore of our Willamette's banks in Clackamas. So they looked at all of those components, the expense of putting one in the Willamette versus putting one in the Clackamas. And it just, these are experts and professionals, and we're going to trust them because that's what they do. They said this is the place that makes the most sense. It's the most cost effective. If we tried to put one in the Willamette, I don't know that our permitting would be, I think our permitting would be difficult at best. Then the expense of putting in a ramp in the Willamette is much higher because now we don't have the roadways or the parking facilities to do that, but then you have to look at protecting your ramp. We have the John Store debris boom just above our transient dock for a reason. We had extremely large logs coming through in the high water events, and sometimes not even high water events. So your maintenance capacity, your construction capacity is more, I think, exponentially expensive in the Willamette than in the Clackamas. And I think that we'll have a more viable maintenance protection value in the Clackamas. Plus, there's nothing in the Clackamas currently in our area.
I think from what I remember of our past discussion, I think we were all pretty much on the same page when it came to, the Clackamas versus the Willamette. I think that made sense. I think the concern that I remember was more about the amount of parkland taken up and by parking and the ability to do the turnaround and possibility of making possibly a somewhat unsafe environment for families with children because of having that traffic there. Yeah.
So, I was kind of going to go there, but can you step back a little bit and walk us through this? Because I'm maybe missing something. My impression was we were shown about 3 different designs, and we gave some feedback. And so if they're at 30% drawings, was one chosen? Which one was chosen? And if this is all going to the commission, when are we going to see it?
So the 30%, you've already seen the 30 the ramp positioning.
Okay.
So the ramp itself is at a 30% construction documentation. The roadway design factor, the lane of travel, has not been determined.
Okay. And when
So
I heard
that
30,
we
I was
left-
thinking
Thank you.
project.
That part we left out because of the contentious points
Okay.
of view
Okay.
or perspectives.
Right.
So that's when the master plan was brought back up, is to take a look at that. What's the most viable lane of traffic plus use of the RV, the frontage. There were more components that kind of started to evolve out of the conversation.
Perfect. So then my follow-on is, again, the commission is looking at this, but shouldn't we be looking at this first?
The North End master plan was on the commission goals and to be completed by this 2017. What will come is they'll say yes or no to moving forward with the master plan, and then you guys will start seeing the documentation.
Is it a cart before the horse thing?
Yeah.
I'm asking,
Yeah,
and if
it-
you're in a work session
thank
with
you.
them, I'm just surprised at this.
That we
Scott
haven't.
had mentioned it at the last meeting, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just.
We heard a lot that night, though.
Yeah, I honestly just got the project in hand on his way out.
I mean, I'm glad they're excited about it, but we should be deeply involved in that rather than 2 or 3 plans kind of getting merged at the commission level.
Yeah, I mean, from what I remember, the rough timeline was we were really looking at repair of the existing boat ramp, which is going to carry us through for the next 5 years or so. And in that time period, which then gives us a couple of different budgeting cycles, we would then have, I mean, even if the city commission says, yeah, we want to do this, it's still not detailed at that point. Then it's really, we need to work over the next 18 months, whatever it would be, to actually work out what that specific plan is.
So is that still the plan?
Yeah.
To repair the old one temporarily?
I was going to report on that later, but I can report on it now.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about it, we put the bids, we got our DSL permits first. Our Corps of Engineer permits just came in last week. In having a discussion with Oregon State Marine Board, they wanted to have our bid opening estimates or dollars that came from the bid opening. So our bid packet went out on Monday. It will close on the 23rd
Of June.
of June. So the closing and the opening of the bids will happen on the 23rd of June. We'll have our engineer of record, Oregon State Marine Board, our department vet the most responsible bidder. Then it would go to the commission as an award on July 6th for the contract. The in-water work period is July 15th, ends August 31st. Thus, the speedy momentum of all the paperwork. Nonetheless, that would be my project, and I'm not busy at all.
Okay, so the short answer is yes, we are going to
We
temporarily
are
fix the old
temporarily
one
fixing the old one, and the
by
temporary
the end of
fix
August.
has to be by the end of August. The in-water work period finishes, and you have to be out of the water.
Okay.
So part of that project is that some of the material that we utilize in the repair would then be utilized in the new ramp. It would still be viable material.
I don't remember if it was a city commission meeting or if it was one of their study sessions, but when they got presented with the same alternatives that we got presented, I did attend that. The commission, I think Mayor Holliday in particular, had the same concerns about the amount of space that would have been lost, particularly under that one alternative where you had that wraparound of getting boats all the way around in a kind of a roundabout fashion. But I tend to agree that we got the plans presented to us. I don't think there was a specific presentation of the kinds of concerns we had at this meeting. It turns out the commission seemed to have the same kind of concerns we had, but I do feel that we need to be in a position to comment on that master plan as it goes forward, and I'm completely agreement on that.
And when it was presented to us, before, it was the hydrologist who came and presented. So he really wasn't in a position to comment on the parking layout and those kinds of things.
Right, we gotta
So,
beat him up on
Exactly.
that.
yeah. So that's
His piece really was placement
Yeah.
of the ramp and its
Right.
viability and sustainability.
Does everyone here get the notices for the commission meetings and the urban renewal? Okay. Well, that was a frustration with the Transportation Advisory Committee, where, time and time again, the commission was, voting on things that never passed, review by the Transportation Advisory Committee. So we were able to make some headway there in terms of incorporating and letting us give feedback, which I think is a healthy thing. I think it's a good thing.
I think it definitely is a healthy thing in terms of master plans. Once they're initiated, it's a public process. The PRAC looks at it and reviews it. Our staff reviews it. So there is a process once they're initiated for everybody to have their input and vet the process.
Mhm.
And then it gets adopted through another process. So there's a lot of public scrutiny.
My concern, though, is in 12 years, I think, of doing these master plans, always start here. And I mean, the city commission doesn't even get involved unless they participate in our public process. Then when they see it, is to adopt it. So, I mean, I'm kind of overstating the obvious, but it's a concern, and maybe that concern can be voiced. that, you know, maybe we're all sitting at some of their work sessions, and we've done that where we have joint city commission prac work sessions. If that's what it takes, if they want to expedite it, then I think we would probably like a seat at the table.
I will let Tony know, and I'll get back to you. Everybody is welcome to those work sessions. It's just they don't usually have as much interaction.
It's a different. That's why I said the making it a joint work session. Then it gives a little more equality at the table.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like they're conflating the timeline for the temporary repair and the need for speed there within the overall plan and trying to get it all done at once.
Right.
And one obviously has a time pressure, and one doesn't have as much of a time pressure. So,
Is the Clackamas Park, the campground RV area that we all, some of us that were on the committee, saw, is that part of this plan? A piece of that master plan?
It is a piece of.
A piece of it. And so that part was never approved by any of the prior city commissions?
There is an existing master plan for the river frontage RV park area.
Okay.
I think it would be considered outdated at this point.
But this is taking that and adding the boat ramp and everything into the plan. Am I correct in seeing that it's the whole Clackamas Park plan instead of piecemeal?
They're stating the project that I was handed was the north end.
The north end where the boat ramp is, which doesn't include the RV park.
It said north end, but it also included the RV park.
Then I am
It's a
confused.
slight
The
extension
south
of the
end.
north
It's
end.
north
I think it's more the river frontage area.
The river frontage area. It
so
seems like the boat ramp's going to take the entire park, though. So I don't know.
the boat ramp is more off the shoreline in the water. It's
Not
just
the boat ramp, but the
Parking lot.
turnaround
the turnaround.
and the parking. Yeah.
But that's part of the public process is to determine what's the best option, because there are several options that were presented in that regard.
Okay.
And I think one of our comments you weren't at the meeting, but it's probably good for you to know. I don't remember who brought it up, but we were looking for the numbers. If the park is, say, 400,000 square feet, how much of that is parking today? And under that new proposal, how much of that becomes parking? So we could
And
look
roadways,
in
yeah.
roadways. So we could really look at the numbers, because when the plan was presented, it was carved out in such a way that
You couldn't even see the entire park, right.
Yeah, you only saw the parking lot, the new proposed parking lot, the angles, and the ramp, which was great, but kind of needed to see that overlaid onto the entire project, because we wanted to know. My comment was, what's the net gain or loss of playable space or open space?
I mean, it seems to me that if we're moving towards a master plan, it almost needs to be a Clackamas Park master plan, because the other concerns that were brought up about what was happening at the north end of the park was as it moves into the central part of the park, and then you're suddenly affecting the space used for the different festivals, and it all kind of starts to snowball. Not that we want to make this bigger, right?
But I almost think like it has to.
But
be.
it has to be.
It
Yeah.
has to be, and I think that's the way to almost slow it down for you. Even is let's kind of contain this back end.
Well, but I think we do have to acknowledge we can only slow it down so much because we only have so many years with the temporary fix.
Right.
So we have to make sure we have the plan and then have a way of raising the money to then fund those changes before that. boat
And
ramp
12
fails,
months is
yeah.
very reasonable to
Right.
hire a contractor, perform a master plan update,
Right. Yeah.
and
So-
if they're willing
Ken
to
Sheener
put
shows the
$20,000
trees
to
out
it.
there.
Right. And if you reflect back on Glen Oak and Filbert Run, those processes did not take necessarily a year long.
Right.
Right.
And Glen Oak being a little more complicated than Filbert Run, I think it's feasible to 6 to 8 months have that process. It's just a matter of how big the master plan gets,
Right.
the funding capacity for that master plan, and then the look ahead after the master plan's done.
Okay.
Oh, we'll be interested in seeing what you bring back to us.
Me too.
Also trees, how many are being taken out, how many are added, that kind of a thing would be good to know too.
I think we would be, we have some trees in there that would, anytime that you're looking at a development portion, you have to do an inventory, and then you have to do a tree health inventory.
Yep.
And down there's quite a number of trees that are in decline. So if, I don't know how many of you have seen the pictures of the cottonwoods that we've taken
They're
down,
terrible, yeah.
and how
Rotten to the core.
when you
Yeah.
looked at them, they looked like they were fine, but they had huge voids in the middle of them. So the potential hazard of some of those cottonwoods, it could be hidden, and that's why we do those health assessments.
We had an arborist come down and do a review on the Meldrum Bar when we were thinking about updating the bike jumps there. And yeah, there were a number of them that flat had to go. They were just in such bad disrepair.
And they can go fairly quickly. So, we try and keep an eye on them. And once we start seeing signs of deterioration or decay, then we have to, start acting, because once we have a high wind factor or a flood factor, those are all exponential impactors. So.
I think, and it's probably part of the plan, but cottonwoods are notorious for what they are. I mean, a flood goes through and you get all the baby cottonwoods immediately starting up, but that's the nature of the beast. But there are other trees that do well, including indigenous trees that do well in a wet environment. Ash and I understand grand fir. So there are other trees that go in there that are going to last more years, and eventually they all have to be cut down at one point or another. But the lives of cottonwood.
And we have been diversifying the tree canopy down there as far as species. So when cottonwoods come down, we're putting in some other species that can handle wet feet, but do a lot better than cottonwoods over the long term.
Right.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Other general business. All right. Silence I take as nothing. So nothing to say. All right. Any future agenda items?
Would that be a point to discuss whether we should look at any of these other items on the ordinance?
That would be a good time for that. So,
Smoking ordinance?
I haven't read through this in years, but I would tend to think that maybe it's a good time to
yeah.
just maybe peruse that, put it on the agenda for next month, and
Yeah.
see if there's something
Yeah.
else.
So park hours.
Yeah, park hours would be one, and other people consider it. I know that there's reasons it's the way it is, but I think there's other reasons.
So just generally looking at all the prohibitions in
Yeah,
the park.
I think that's a good
Okay,
thing.
park
Maybe there's a whole new
prohibitions.
topic. But maybe there's something we don't. Denise, through the industry, are we missing something that we should add? I don't want to put something else on your plate, but just in general, It's a good time while they're thinking about it to throw a couple in front of them rather than piecemeal it out.
I'll put park ordinance review on our next agenda,
All right.
as well as we're doing a work session at 6:30
Mhm.
on the next meeting.
All right.
With
I missed
specs.
our last meeting, so this may already have been talked about, but we have a trail plan, master plan, but I think it's quite old. Is there?
We updated it
We updated it.
5, maybe 6
Should say
years
5
ago.
to 6.
Yeah,
Sounds
5 or
right.
6 years ago.
Okay.
So it's
We
not.
see that again? Yeah.
I can send that out.
It might
Actually,
be good
that
to.
one is online
Mhm.
on
Okay.
our web pages, so you can just pull that one.
It
directly
definitely
off.
is, because I've looked at it in the last 6 months.
I know the Oregon City Trail Alliance is real interested in working with the city on seeing how we can support the efforts. I know funding is an issue, but so yeah, and at the depot we plan to have a community board with maps that we can highlight or name or point to trails within Oregon City and get people more knowledgeable about that. So
That kind of goes along with Doug's desire to tie signage between trails.
yes,
Try to connect them.
Do we want that as a future agenda item, or is that going in coordination with what Doug was talking about as far as a budgeting cycle?
Yeah, to me, that seems more like staff time, so I would, just, right? I mean, Doug, I think the primary thing for you is an inventory where those connections could be made
Yep,
first,
sure.
where we start. So then it
Exactly.
comes back down to, when you have time.
Well, and if you're on a map, I don't know, it may not be important. We'll find out, but the trail that comes off of Fifth, where it turns into Lynn and goes up the hill, most people I talk to have no clue that you can get up there and then over and then up another one up to the bluff there and look
Right.
out.
Yeah.
And what a really neat
right.
walk. I mean, it kicks your
Yeah, real hard.
yeah, but it if we had a placard down there or something simple, I don't
There are several parks that have connecting trails.
right. But if we had signage that
Right.
said okay here and then go this way, so we're thinking about doing walking like like walking events to where we can walk around and see if we can't get public involvement. But we're in the future.
I'm going to suggest not in this current year, but after the beginning of the year, that we actually have a discussion about the Trails Master Plan again, even if it's only 6 years old.
And I also think, that might be something to review for this group's goals.
Yes.
So in the goal setting portion.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, we tried to get the Lions Club, we really tried to put a lot of effort into trying to get the Safe Routes to School program, and there's state and federal funding for that. But the bottom line is it takes a champion at the school. We had one at John McLaughlin, but then the principal was just really excited about it. But then she was transferred to another school, so the momentum was lost, and our club was just too busy to. But I think that is such a neat thing to. And once it catches on, once people kind of get the vision for it, they really become popular. But it's just really, it's like throwing matches at wet logs. It's really hard to get it going.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of possibilities there, right? There's the Safe Pathways to School program, which growing up we actually had that in Eugene.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot, like I know Albany has a whole tie-in to their historic district and historic tools, historic walking tours that tie together actually their different parks. You can go from Monteith Park to Waterfront Park, and there's actually guided tours that way. So there's a lot of different possibilities and a lot of groups we could access to try to get them involved. So.
I might mention the former principal is a member of the Natural Resource Committee.
Oh, yep.
And used
There
to be
you
a
go.
member. That's right. All right. Anything else? All right. Member report.
Well, I just wanted to ask, just looking down here, we haven't had any kind of report about the Ermatinger House for a while. If we could get an update
Okay.
about what's going on in that. That could be at in the future if you need to.
Future item. I
Yeah.
can actually do it in staff reports. How's
Okay,
that?
I'd appreciate that.
All right. Member reports. Chris, shall we start with you?
Sure. Nothing tonight.
Just an update. I mean, it's kind of related to parks, but the depot is coming along, and carpenters and plumbers and electricians. The place is a mess. Equipment's showing up. It's pretty exciting. A lot of people coming through on bicycles, and can't wait for the place to open. So the Oregon City has been wonderful to work with. I've always heard horror stories about working with cities and all the rules and codes. I mean, and there are rules and codes, but so far my experience has been really positive, and so I'm thankful for that. And then I hope I can mention this, but we're talking. It's just talking, but there's a proposed trail between the Cove and Abernathy Green, which would be come under the tunnels, the ODOT tunnels under 205, and then under the UP tracks or over them or whatever it may be. But there is the developer at the Cove he's said he would be interested in helping to fund that, create that connectivity. And so John Lewis is working to get a meeting of the minds, with Union Pacific and ODOT. So I'm excited about that.
There was Clackamas Community College had its 50th anniversary this last Saturday, and it was held at the Environmental Learning Center. Although that's not a park, it's a tremendous natural area that headwaters in Mill Creek, and the design for the facility, which has always been ponds and natural areas, but hasn't been also jointly designed for stormwater treatment. That design has gone through the Planning Commission, has been approved by the Planning Commission. It's probably going to go over a 2-year period because the in-water period applies to that area as well as it does almost any waterway in the state. But it's going to function still as a major natural resource, but is also going to be part of the stormwater system, and so that's progressing. I mentioned it before that the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council is putting forward a grant application, which has now been submitted to the Metro Enhancement Committee, as well as another application to the Metro Nature in the Neighborhoods grant to work on what functions basically as a stormwater system, Scattering Creek, that goes through the cemetery. Those grant proposals have gone forward, and we're hoping we can see funding for the initial engineering. The desire of getting that done at this point was so that when Public Works is planning to put the actual, I'll call it not quite a restoration, but a reconfiguring of that system, they're going to put that on the next 2-year budget cycle. It'd be nice to have the engineering work done ahead of time, so we're trying to get that through at this point in the game. So when they get, presuming that they get the budget item approved in the next cycle for the City Commission, that in fact by that time they will know what needs to be done.
John?
I would just like to draw everybody's attention to the Memorial Day service notice that Denise put at your places at the Mountain View Cemetery. I'm personal friends with the guest speaker. He's a retired lieutenant commander in the Navy and a very good speaker from what I've seen in the past, but nonetheless his story and message I think will be above board and appreciated, and I will be there with my family and hope to see you guys.
I will be there.
Of course.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me about that, because I do go to the Memorial Day event every year, and it is really a lovely service, and the middle school band that comes and plays, and the flyover and the bugle and the speakers. It's well attended, so bring your lawn chair if you want a place to sit, or your blanket if you want to sit on the ground. Last Saturday there was a lot going on in the city, not just Clackamas Community College with their big anniversary event, but the event that was held down at Clackamas Park, the Pioneer Family Fun Festival and the Teddy Bear Parade, and I hope a lot of people had a chance to take part in those events, and I'm sorry that the rain started to come down just as people were packing up their tents, and so we felt sorry for the vendors, but that's what happens when you have an event in May in Oregon. But once again, the service groups here in Oregon City always do such a great job on those. And just to let you know, Hillendale Neighborhood Association is planning to have their July 5th meeting to be a picnic at Hillendale Park at the pickleball courts. So get your pickleball paddles ready.
Sounds like fun.
Partner?
Pioneer Center News, we had a full senior trip to the North Clackamas Park District to participate in a field day. Next item, the parking lot is slated to be replaced in either June or July, and we'll continue to keep you posted. A new part-time kitchen worker, Angela Hartman, started on Wednesday. And we have a big volunteer recruitment push for Meals on Wheels volunteers. Meals on Wheels volunteers in progress. It's going well, and we are getting a good response. And I have something that I found, that I'm sure everybody's seen this in the newspaper a few weeks ago on Milwaukee, adopting a resolution to eliminate use of neonicotinoid pesticides within the city, and because they're so toxic to bees and other pollinators, and subsequently threaten our food systems. So I don't. I'm hoping. Besides that, the city and other government agencies operate within the city now are required to suspend the use of these neonicotinoids and other bee toxic insecticides on all city properties unless otherwise declared emergency directed by in the Clackamas County Integrated Pest Management. I didn't know if anybody would be interested in putting this on a future agenda to maybe propose doing this starting with us, and maybe it was spread through the city. It seems like if we're going, this kind of goes along with the healthy parks that Bob is, is proposing, and I know this would be beneficial to all our citizens, and at the same time, I know that with the Parks Foundation proposing putting in plants like this is what it's all about. Putting these pollinators, which are also drought tolerant, and beautiful to beautify the parks. So I don't know. Is there anybody that has anything else?
I would be very supportive of
I would
Something like
suggest
this.
maybe making this presentation, I could do it briefly at the Natural Resource Committee too, because that would be of great interest to them.
Okay.
One question that comes to mind is, does the city of Oregon City use neonicotinoids, which I don't expect an answer off the top of your head. So they're not as common as they used to be. So
Most of what we utilize is not broadcast spray. We tend to do what we call, sorry, my lingo is targeted, or so it's like as you see them, they are sprayed. It's not a broadcast spray. We do a broadcast spray on our grasses for clover, because that can cost us more than $10,000 a year in repairs for our mowers. So there's different applications and different chemicals out there that we utilize in different ways that we open and close parks or sign parks when we utilize them. Plus our guys are all having to go through public pesticide licensing. So there are, as a state, things that you can and cannot spray in public. So we abide by that protocol.
I know that one other thing that I was going to mention was that on the last part of that article, it gave a phone number for the Xerces Society, and I called them today, but I didn't get an answer. But they do have an outreach, or we educate an outreach, and among that outreach it would include park managers, and so they will come in and they offer a training course in being able to provide a conservation program to get off these types of pesticides, and using beneficial insects that would take on whatever they're spraying for. So
I would just say, as far as this group is an advisory committee, that banning things would be a policy. So there obviously would be process to get to that point. So, and also keeping in mind what your goals are. So does this align with your goals? It's something to consider. In terms of our maintenance side, are the options viable for us to manage to keep it to the point of what the public wants? We have a limited crew. What we do now, we aren't keeping up on spraying as it is. So if you want to see what natural looks like, you can visit some of our current natural states. Ermitinger is one of them right now that's been not as heavily managed because we have, of our staff of 6, we've been down to 2 most often because of illness. We have a medical leave. We have a paternity leave. We had somebody depart for another position. So 3 of our full-time guys are out. Of our 6 guys, we had 3, and they've been trading viruses. So we've been down to 2. We're trying to pick up 1 full-time position. Interviews happened last week. So in terms of viability of maintaining public parks, sometimes looking at strictly natural is not necessarily effective. So grand scheme, in terms of what options are available to us to what options are viable. So I'm not saying one way or the other is better. I am just saying that small crew, viability, sustainability, clean and green, that's what we want. But again, small crew. So what are our options that are viable to maintain the public's expectation as well? So I'm not opposed to any ideas. I'm just global picture versus one item.
Well, and I'm completely, uneducated about this topic. I'd be interested to know something about it. What are the alternatives? Are there alternatives? Maybe they're not, but I'd be interested to know that.
And I think I've reached out to see, just in that particular case, happens to be Scott's jurisdiction. So I reached out to Scott today and asked him, with this ordinance, what is the maintenance crew going to be doing? So looking at, gleaning before we do anything is always an option of looking at, what options are out there. We can look at what they're doing, what's viable for what the alternative is. So
Yeah.
that's a really, really good test case to look at when that occurs as an ordinance. What are the effects? What are the options? What's the outcome? And is it to the public standard?
Yep.
Is the public upset or is the public happy?
I can appreciate that. You mentioned spraying for clover. I presume that can go on as long as it's before the clover starts to bloom. I mean, that would be the concern about pollinators, is it being hit before the clover goes into blooming.
We're hitting it before we have flowers.
Yeah, and so
timing is
so
everything.
I think it's not a case of just banning insecticides outright, but looking at the timing and the effectiveness that would minimize issues in terms of the pollinators.
Our maintenance regime is we really do try and hit things before. So there's pre-emergent. There's different types of ways to apply. Your best option is if you can put pre-emergent on, then you don't get them coming up and blooming. And typically in our parks, because we have such a low maintenance crew, we don't have a lot of blooming items that take a lot of maintenance. So, we try and keep our maintenance to a minimum. And although it's nice to have a lot of flowers in the park, that tends to be a lot of maintenance.
Well, there's a difference between the herbicides and pesticides.
Exactly.
And so taking care of that clover is an herbicide problem, not a pesticide. So, but I want to thank Roger for bringing this to our attention. But I had a quick question for you too, Roger. Which parking lot is being replaced at the Pioneer Center?
I believe it's the one across the street.
Actually, I'll
No?
make an adjustment to that.
Oh, okay,
The parking lot attached to the building
that's right.
is
Sorry.
the one that is being overhauled completely. The one across the street, kind of next to the church, is going to have some patching, and they're going to slurry
Slurry seal? Okay.
so that it has a little more life length. So those 2 items, they won't be congruent. We'll get one done, then we'll do the other.
Good move.
And just as a word of warning, this is also in conjunction with the 6th Street, John Adams, Jefferson Streets, and I think 5th is one of the streets that is being improved upon by the street department. So if you're in that vicinity, along with the Carnegie Library construction, the summer is going to be busy there, as well as Jefferson going down to the pool. That will also be an impacted street. So if you want to know where the impacted streets are this summer, because they are doing a lot of paving projects with the PMUF program, I think they have that map online now.
They do. Right. So,
Thank you.
so I haven't commented on the pesticide thing, but I would say to wrap it up, I'm really curious to let this go to the Natural Resource Committee first. It seems like their purview. However, I'm just curious for maybe a staff report next time on what we use, if we use any, and if so, what is it? And just a brief description, at least for now. And then we can kind of see where to go from there. And that way we're not taking too much of our time if it's not necessary, but on the other hand, we may judge it's completely necessary at that point. You know. Is that?
Yeah, and I think this, well, actually, any other comments or?
I'll bring it up in the next Natural Resources Committee.
Okay. So then I was just going to make the comment that, I mean, if this, as we're reviewing our goals, if we're looking at setting a goal of being green or being environmental or however we'd want to phrase that in there about how we manage our parks, then I think it comes back to, but I think you're right, it goes to natural resources first to kind of assess. We can get some some information. I know there's movement at the state level to actually ban them across the state. After the report came out in Nature about 18 months ago. You know, I mean, it's going to be but it's going to be over several years that this will all take place. So, all right, staff reports. Recreation update.
I sent to everyone the Recreation Aquatics Pioneer Center and Parks update via email. Did you have any questions in regards to any of those?
It doesn't indicate on there, you know, it says how many rentals that we had, but there was nothing about how much each rental is, and I'm sure that there's somewhere online that tells us how much it is to rent one of those shelters.
Shelters?
Yeah, the park shelters rentals.
It's by number of people, type of group, type of use, special use.
Okay.
So,
So I'm
again,
hoping those numbers really go up in the summertime.
They do. The
Okay.
shelter rentals don't really start ramping up until we get dry weather. So that part is the part that, to break down the numbers, is a lot of staff time that in the summer when we're doing the reservations, we can't keep up. And we've got a phone backlog just trying to do the reservations. So the report is just generated from number of reservations and then a bottom line. So breaking them down it would be a little bit more than I think is necessary at this point for this group, unless there's just...
No, that's, okay, that was just something I was looking at and noticing too about, you know, the RV park obviously being closed with zero revenue. Is there any chance that the RV park is opening this summer?
I am not going to guarantee anything. We've been very actively pursuing park hosts and interviewing them. They've put the applications in, we've done the interviews, and so far we haven't had anybody willing to take on the RV park as a volunteer park host, and especially alone. We were very, very blessed with the gems that we had down there for the years that we had them. They did it on their own. They would open the gates at 5, close them at 10, take care of every issue down there, clean the restrooms, pull the garbage. That's just their personality. They were great.
Stars in heaven there.
So having the rock stars we had and then trying to get something attainable to that, people are just not necessarily interested. So we've been struggling with that. We're still pursuing applications. We're still interviewing people. So
All right. Okay, thanks for that update.
May I make a suggestion on that?
Mhm.
If push comes to shove, that's the biggest revenue generator in the city, and maybe we need to pay somebody
it's not the biggest revenue generator in the city.
for
but
the
it's-
for the Parks Department.
It is a revenue generator for the parks. The cemetery actually is a bigger revenue generator.
Okay.
Um,
But it also
it's a more
costs
seasonal.
more.
Yeah.
It's the best net gain.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay. I had to correct myself. But anyway, I'm just thinking it needs to be open. And so if we have to encourage somebody, maybe we need to.
It's a discussion to be had because of our approved budget. So paying bodies were not approved in our budget at this point. So it is a discussion I have had with the city manager. So we are still working through that, how we would function, because it's open 24 hours. And a paid position, BOLI, laws and regulations, how many bodies would that take? So
It would help to have two, and they could share it, and we give them 2 spots down there. You know, just throwing ideas out there.
we're working. We're
Okay.
working through that.
How, what's your confidence level? I'm having a hard time judging.
I think that tells us right there.
I'm hesitating to say, just because we've had such a hard time.
Really?
It's not the easiest job as a volunteer or as a paid person. You get some great clientele down there, and you get some not so great clientele. It's a tough position, and the number of clients that don't have homes that visit the park and stay in the park are also a part of the equation. And so it's causing some park host potential people to kind of shy away from it.
It's just turned into a tent city.
We're working on it.
Thank you.
All right.
The Wesley Lynn Park ballot measure. I don't know how many of you visited the voting
No.
site. It's still unofficial. As of 5:45, it was a margin of 1.
I said 3.
Which way?
I believe it was
It had been 3.
it was against. But
Flip by 4.
I think they're supposed to update this afternoon. I did not see the afternoon update. I have a feeling if it's going to be that close, it is likely to recount.
I thought this was already into the recount.
I think when you get to like the ones and twos,
I thought the recount had already occurred.
my understanding,
one.
my understanding from this morning is it has the potential of a recount again. I don't know. It's unofficial, so while it's unofficial, until they tell me it's official, it's still unofficial.
Any chance of it going on the November ballot for a revote?
That I don't know. I think that once the official vote comes through, then it'll be a discussion. If it's not passed, that the developer will have to consider his options, and that's kind of up to him if he wants to continue to pursue it or not. Glen Oak, Oregon Parks Recreation Department local government grant. Sorry, let me go back to my notes really quick. I am scheduled for a presentation on June 1st. So Kurt Lango from Lango Hansen Architects coming down with me to do the presentation to the OPRD board, and we're hoping for a grant. The grant request was for $500,000 with a match of $1,508,010. I'm not sure how they came up with the $10 increment there, but the total project cost projection was $2,008,010. They on the grant application, which I just saw this week, the project start date would be September 16th and completed October 17th.
I didn't understand. How could it take just 1 month?
September 2016, October 2017.
Thank you. Okay, so it's going to take 13 months.
Approximately.
Okay. Thank you.
So I looked up the election results, and it's changed again.
Has it?
It's losing by 4 now. So Monday it was +3, then -1, and now it's -4.
So they're still counting.
That's as of 4:28 this afternoon.
So you did get the update. Mine was, I looked at it.
And the sad part is 856 ballots were blank of people that submitted ballots.
Wow. We already hit on Memorial Day with Sean's report. Wednesday at the City Commission meeting, we were presented with the Ruth McBride Powers Memorial Award for the 2016 Preservation Month, and it was awarded to the Community Services Department. So I'll let you guys take a peek at that. This award was presented to the Community Services Department. However, I do want to recognize that the renovation, restoration of the Ermatinger House was a massive team effort. And we acknowledged not just Community Services, Scott Archer, myself, the commission, current present commission, our past commission members who were extremely supportive. Doug was one of those individuals. Rocky Smith, Marge, and Rolla Harding have been huge supporters of that house for decades. Maya Foti from Architectural Resources Group, Bill Hawkins, who is a historian who donated his time throughout the project, T.S. Gray, who is our construction company, Christina Robertson Gardner, who from planning has been a fabulous supporter and has helped us with grant funding applications and actually garnering those grants. SHPO, Preserving Oregon, Friends of the Ermatinger House, National Trust for Historic Preservation, Clackamas County Block Grant, and Urban Rural. Everybody, and I have probably missed a few people, but again, the award wasn't just to Community Services. It was a massive and multi-agency team effort. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I think what was kind of interesting in that process is how much of an unknown history of the building that went through that we really didn't know anything about, that they determined in the architectural evaluation or whatever you call that, and namely that everybody knew that there was an add-on in the back, but in fact that the main area had a add-on. The original Ermatinger was actually smaller than I think we visualized, if I'm correct on that, and the stairway was in a different place than it was originally, and that affected the structural integrity. So I think that got changed right back to its original position.
In the original configuration.
So a lot of information was garnered. I'm mispronouncing the word. Was obtained in that process about the history of the building, the construction of the building that was not known before.
And it's true. We're not done with the house. So while we've shored up the house, restored the majority of the house, and the systems are updated, we still have, there's shear walls, so part of the original paneling or wood boards that were the interior of the house had to be removed to put shear walls in for current construction, and so that the house wasn't racking. So the shear walls are in. You can see the boards. Walls were moved to original configurations that they had found through vetting through the history and looking at the original configuration of where things should have been. So we still have a few things on our punch list that are going on right now. The shutter hold opens are being, I think they're doing those tomorrow or Saturday. There's a couple little paint items that they're going to be doing. We're looking at some of the deck posts started pulling apart already through the winter exposure. So they're going to come back and they're going to fix those. We're looking at, we have a grant for about $6,200 for the wallpaper. We assume the wallpaper would be, the backing is a muslin, and it just gets applied to the boards. And the boards are really rough hewn, so there's not a flat surface. It doesn't look pretty when it's done, but that's how they used to do it back then, is the muslin, and then the wallpaper went on after that. We got some estimates for just the wallpaper backing, which we thought we could put up and then, start fundraising for the wallpaper. $33,000 for just the backing. The replica wallpaper of period nature with the application process is likely to be 2 to 3 times the backing. So with sticker shock in mind, we're looking at some options of how we can facilitate finishing the house. It's something that we're still looking at and still working through. But all in all, the house is structurally sound. It's restored. We're just getting to the final finish line. And once we get to that final punch list, all the little nitpicky things within our warranty period, TS Gray will be done. We'll be looking at how can we finish the interior of the house. And then the programmatic aspect with the Friends group. So those are the pieces that are still in motion and still forward moving. So that's Ermitinger. Clackamas Boat Ramp update. We already did that. Waterboard Park illegal tree cutting. This is going to be really short and sweet because there's not a lot because it's still in legal process that we can do publicly. The second arborist assessment was completed, and I think commission will be discussing in executive session. That's all I can really say.
Are you able to tell us what that estimate came in at?
Pardon?
Are you able to tell us what that estimate came in at?
Not really, because of the way the methodology works. There's different ways to look at it. So
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not versed in how we can match the numbers up quite yet. So, the community services director position was opened 2 weeks ago. It closes tomorrow for applications. And as far as the process and timelines go, that's all I know. And I think that is the end of my report.
All right. So our next item is we need to select the date of the next meeting. The standard date does not work. Denise, you're out, I believe, at that time.
I'm out on my honeymoon that week. However, the week before or the week after, it looks like this room is open and available.
I'm sorry, it's got to be on your honeymoon. You're going to have to come back.
Can I FaceTime?
So if I could propose something. So thinking 2 meetings ahead, our August meeting in the last couple of years has been counted as the Parks Day event. Is that Friday, August 5th? If so, moving this to June 30th would
Yeah.
almost make it, you just skip a July meeting
Yeah.
technically, but we're meeting almost 1 month apart for each of
Yeah.
those.
Are you talking, okay, so June 30th and then August 5th?
Yeah, if I'm understanding the August 5th is our Parks Day.
Right.
Then that works
Yeah.
good.
Well, I think that would work great. I think also, I mean, if we're talking June 6th, we're talking, which was the other date you proposed, correct?
June 16th.
June 16th, sorry, misheard you. So, okay,
That
then it
seemed
sounds
kind of
close.
soon was what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, I'd rather have a little more time between. I don't think we have
I
anything
like your
particularly
thinking,
pressing.
Sean.
Yeah.
So
So-
All right.
June 30th and skip July, is that
Yep.
what I heard?
June 30th and August 5th.
Okay.
And then in regards to Park Day event, I know that last year you guys got together away from the committee meeting and collaborated on responsibilities, what you guys were going to present there, what you wanted to do. And then our staff provided just kind of some support. So I don't know how you guys are looking at Park Day this year. I haven't been involved in that discussion yet, so.
We haven't discussed it much, but my recollection is the PrAC meeting prior to that,
The one in June.
the one in June.
Yeah.
We just had, a very minor discussion because now most of the stuff was kind of there. In other words, I think staff brought tables. We went
And
into
canopy.
that in the canopy, and I think Scott or staff brought, a park trails maps, some brochures, things like that. I think there was a
And
table.
door prizes.
Yeah. And so really, I think the majority of what PrAC did was man the booth, attend.
We were involved in obtaining the bounce house, former PrAC member.
I thought
Right.
Scott exclusively basically handled that, though. I mean, that wasn't a.
Okay, so, but we need to make sure
Function
that
of it.
that happens, because that's a big
Yeah.
part of it, unless,
Staff was a little more in askance of not doing the bounce house and maybe doing the balloon guy or the face painting, or a little more interactive with a bigger age differential. Bounce houses tend to be smaller. They felt like that it was a little rough in there.
I get the age thing, and the balloons isn't a bad idea. The only thing is, if you're going to do balloons, you've got to have more than one after looking at daddy-daughter dances.
I absolutely agree with you there. Absolutely.
But I wouldn't object to them, or some like a clown face painting and balloons, that sort of thing.
Are we discussing it right now, or what?
That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
It's thinking maybe that needs to be added to our June work session.
Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah, and it should be.
But if I guess the only question for tonight's discussion though is, do you need anything from us as far as discussion tonight if you're needing to hire contractors?
I think if we are doing this on June 30th, that there should probably be some discussion about everybody's role in this, and do we want to do anything different? Are we trying to be a little more interactive? Are we trying to get a message out? Or I think Park Day has my understanding from Scott has been something directed to what you folks want to message to the community, and we're just supporting. So I think that I kind of lend it back to you.
I mean, I taking into consideration what Steph had said about the bounce house. I mean, I kind of got that feedback from my daughters about it. Was they were they're older teenagers, but it was there were some people in there they thought shouldn't have been in the bounce house, and they got some of their friends out of the bounce house. So I like the idea. I mean, the balloon person, face painting, those things, can be, I personally have had my face painted with my daughters, and that was just a couple of years ago. And they told me it was an improvement. But so I think those are great ideas, and if we could do that, I think it's also nice. I remember the first one, at least I attended. We also had additional information we had about Glen Oak Park and Filbert Run. I think do we want to have something about the boat ramp? Do we even want to maybe see if the Willamette Falls group want to be there as another option and another opportunity?
So are we discussing this now? Or?
Yeah. Yes, we are. We are now discussing this.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
What do you think?
well, I have problems with Parks Night
Yeah.
because it's actually park night, because we've had it in the same place now. This will be the
Sure.
third year. And if we're going to do this, I'm thinking I would like to see us do a survey to see how many people actually come from other parts of the city to be, if it's Parks Night.
Well, it's the movie night. I mean, that's the draw.
But how many people that'd be interesting to see how many people come from other parts of the city if it's just the neighborhood, surrounding neighborhood.
I can tell you from living where I walked out of my back gate into the park to go to those movies in the park days, that because of that night being movies, it is the large majority is not the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can tell also by the size of the parking lot, because the neighborhood walks to it. And the side streets are packed all the way to Myers. It's very surprising. I mean, I get that's a great question, and I think from my personal observation, it's surprisingly the rest of the city
This is
attending.
I think this year is the fourth year of movies in the park. Is that correct? Yes. My business sponsors some of them, so I've gone at least to one, actually more, but at least to one of them every year, and it is growing. I mean, people are becoming throughout the city more aware of those, and so I can understand your concern, but the movies themselves are a draw, and I think it really makes a lot of sense to tie them together at this point. I don't have an opposition of considering another venue at one point, but I think for this year at least that we probably should have it at the same site. And it would be, since we're going to have people there, maybe we could have somebody asking people what neighborhood they're coming from. I think having a survey at that particular event coming up would be good, but I think it's going to entail perhaps maybe us being the people that are doing the survey or in some
That's a
manner.
good idea.
Well, what I was going to ask, are you sponsoring that night?
I don't know what night I'm sponsoring.
I'm not a public speaker, but in that regard, I don't. But sometimes somebody gets up and introduces the movie and speaks, and I've heard you speak before,
Yeah,
and that's one of those that sometimes a show of hands from all the people seated,
sure.
might be an interesting way to see who your neighbor is at the movie.
You'd be surprised how hard it is to count hands, though.
No, but I think
Yeah, it
just
does. It
from
should
looking
be.
around, you're going to get a real feel whether
Right.
The other thing I've seen done is, like we had where we had the placards up. If you put up a city map and then have people, especially for the kids can
Oh,
come
that's
up
a
and
good
find where
idea.
their house is
Great
and
idea.
stick them on.
Yeah.
Because it tends to get more of a response just because parents let their kids do it, and it's a fun thing to do.
Because I like your
I
question.
don't
Yeah.
want to suggest that I'm against parks.
Oh, not at all.
But I guess from the beginning, I've always thought that we should have a banner up, and I brought this up before, like across 7th here, or someplace to really promote it a little more. And it is a tough time because it's Friday night, or is it? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Friday night, right? Yeah, it's Friday night, and people are coming home from work, and it's probably a task to get yourself picked up and go out again. But my way I'm looking at it is, I like to see all the parks incorporated somehow, so that and I suggested that we have at least a little screen. I said that a monitor screen with all the parks, so it changes and gives a little picture of it. I don't know if it's just a little suggestion, that there are other parks, and so that you can look at it. So, oh yeah, that's that park, and I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but I'm just trying to somehow incorporate the park system into it.
Work session at 6 next month.
Yeah. So 6.
Adjustment.
Denise, I have a suggestion too. They always put a sign there on Lynn how to access the movies. That's not the way I come into it. I come off at Leland, and there is no parks. There's no sign directions off of Leland. It would be a nice to have a sandwich board sign, like I think you do on Lynn, to indicate how to get to the park, but also on Leland Road as well.
And the other thing I was wondering, Roger and Joyce, maybe the Oregon City Parks Foundation might be in a place. I don't know what those banners cost, but maybe they would be in a place to sponsor the banner, since it's probably not in the budget.
We're working on funding, so.
I'm just throwing. Denise, do you have any idea what those banners cost for a week or two ahead of time?
I don't know offhand, but Rochelle has done banners before. I can ask her.
Maybe throw that out to us maybe prior to the next meeting, just in an email, if you could, and then we could kind of see
Actually,
if.
it's not so much the cost of the banner, it's the installation.
Yeah.
It's a little more difficult to put those across. You have to get. You can't be in conflict with somebody who already has that slot, and then the installation cost. There is a cost for installation
But-
and
Yeah.
then permitting.
But if we could do some advertising at the concerts in the park, some
Rochelle does
some
do the
signing,
announcement.
not just
and
announcing, but some signage about it, and
I'll ask
and
her about
something.
signage.
So, and have us there wearing sandwich boards or whatever, right? Just to remind people about them.
She also does our Facebook for the recreation aquatic side. So, and then the city put it in the trail news. It's on our website, and then it gets in the rolling screen in here, and it, as a new news item, flips on our website. So we do the social media piece as well. So just the traffic signage is a little tougher. So I'll have to ask and see if there's any option on that.
All right, so work session at 6 on the 30th. Anything else?
Oh, we're moving the work session up to 6 o'clock
Yeah,
so that we can talk about both items.
talk about both items.
Okay.
All right. That is it for the agenda. The meeting is adjourned.